We're going to go ahead and get started. It is absolutely my pleasure to introduce our speaker, our keynote speaker for Constitution Day. Judge Streit is a great public servant. He spent over 27 years on the bench. He spent 13 years as a district court judge, 5 years on the Court of Appeals, and a little over 9 years on the Iowa Supreme Court. So it is my honor to welcome my friend and former Iowa Supreme Court Justice Michael Streit.
Good morning, good afternoon. We're in the cusp here of change. Chris Moon has been very kind to ask me to speak to you today about many things that come in front of the Iowa Supreme Court and maybe why I'm here today. I'm a retired justice. A lot of it's attributable to the marriage equality decision that we handed down in 2009, and she's asked me to talk to you about the role of our courts, equal protection under our Constitution, the state of Iowa, in the 2010 retention campaign. And that back then you guys were still in high school, but we'll try to refresh what you may have heard or thought was happening back then. Also, she asked that I mention a few things about the Pro Violent Courage Award that 3 of us justices received out in Boston in 2012. I think they're going to encourage that you ask questions. I'll try to go through my prepared materials as quickly as possible to let you ask just about anything you want, other than, last Friday night I had the cop pulled me over and said it looked like I had been drinking. Now, did I have to blow into that machine or not? You know, those you can save those for later. We do have a district court judge here, Judge Moon, who will also help answer questions of those nature. Is that good? That's a good... Fine. Okay, so he's consented to that. So let's talk a little bit about maybe why I'm here today. Other than my brilliant personality and my friendship with Chris, is the Iowa Supreme Court in 2009 recognized marriage equality in Iowa. We struck down a statute that banned gay marriage. In the summer of 2010, the next year, an out-of-state effort initially funded by Newt Gingrich started a campaign against the 3 justices for their retention. Coincidentally, that was the election year in which 3 of our 7 were up for retention election. In Iowa, we're in merit selection. That is, we have a commission that's half lawyers and half lay people appointed by the governor that nominate candidates for the governor to pick out of 3 for the Supreme Court, 2 for the district court. And that's called merit selection, as opposed to general election judges that sit, they're on the ballot and they run. In some states they run as a party candidate. Most states they run as a non-party candidate, but they run for election. Our response to that was to go to merit selection, and then we stand for retention, where the voters can vote yes or no, should this justice be retained for another term of years. Our election, 3 of us on the Supreme Court, after our gay marriage decision came out, were on the ballot in 2010, and that's when the campaign started against us, mostly funded by almost always funded by out-of-state money. Newt Gingrich brought it in that he was wooing the evangelical vote. So he started by providing them $350,000 to start that campaign that summer. That was unknown to any of us until about January of next year, when an evangelical minister printed a story about how he bought his way into the evangelical crowd and impacted our election greatly. It's not quite like the Russians, but we had that feeling at the time. In 2010, the voters then voted not to retain our Chief Justice, Marcia Turnus, Justice David Baker from Cedar Rapids, and myself from Des Moines, Johnston area. In 2012, 2 years later, the Profiles in Courage Award unexpectedly gave us their award. It was unexpected because when we cast our votes in Varnum, we weren't thinking about being a courageous court, doing the right thing. We were just doing our jobs. When we went to Boston to receive the award, we had an adventure that was truly fulfilling in that it acknowledged what we did. It was a validation for our vote in the Varnum case, but it was also similar to this validation to the gay community that it felt after our decision. Back when our decision was issued, I was at a reception for a swearing in of a new judge, and a lawyer, I could just see that he was standing. I had to make some remarks, but this lawyer kept standing to the side, and he was an experienced litigator. We have a technical term in the legal profession that he was a kick-ass lawyer. He was a tough SOB. And I just noticed him out the corner of my eye. Just waited till, when a lot of times I make speeches, there a certain small crowd wants to ask kind of private questions, things like that. And he waited till it cleared, and then he came up and thanked me for the gay marriage decision, the Varnum decision. And I said, well, I was only one of 7. No, but he wanted to thank me because, and then he started tearing up. And he wanted to thank me for how it recognized the validity of these human beings to be recognized as equals amongst their fellow citizens, having equal rights. And because of his emotional response to our decision and in front of me, a sitting judge, that he had argued many cases in front of me, I finally said in a very Iowa way, well, do you have a dog in the fight? And then he said, well, I have a daughter that's gay. And she feels so much part of our society that her rights have been recognized, that she is equal. And so I thanked him for the compliment and sent him on his way. Then years later, after I got voted off the court, I was sitting in an arbitration trial where I sit as a private judge for hire. And the big case, litigation over computer software. I rule one way, it's 50 million there, and I rule another way, it's 30 million the other side. So it's a lot of responsibility. Case goes on for 2 weeks. In an Iowa courtroom, it would have taken 4 weeks. That's why they go to arbitration. But the lawyer, which is that same lawyer, asked at the second week, he goes, on Wednesday, he goes, can we quit on Thursday and take Friday off? And I says, why would we do that? Well, I have a daughter that's getting married, and they expect me to do a bunch of stuff with, he used the S word, but a bunch of stuff around the wedding, and I really need Friday off. In opposing, I said, opposing counsel was delighted. They for Minneapolis, they were glad to get out of town. So I continued, and I never did ask him. Never had an ex parte they call it an outside conversation, but I just assumed it was that daughter that was allowed to marry somebody that she loved, rather than somebody of the opposite sex. So a lot of things just always come back to roost. In the Profiles in Courage Award, of which there's a kind of a 2-part acknowledgement of what we did in the actual decision itself, but also they were specifically acknowledging what we did after the decision, when the campaign against us started, that we thought we would not get involved in politics, that we would make personal speeches. Believe me, we won the Rotary vote, okay? The Rotary in Kiwanis. But we did not buy campaign commercials, even they were running stuff against us. And we tried to maintain what we could call some dignity, but I won't use that phrase quite that way. I have to give a speech next month in Kentucky, which is very much a partisan judicial state. And I won't say you guys have no dignity because you run on partisan elections. But by not selling out to the moneyed interest, raising money for commercials, running radio ads and TV ads. The profiles in Courage people thought that was a good stand to take, to try to keep our judiciary out of politics, not to roll around in the mud, the blood, and the beer of electoral politics. That's my rationalization. That's something more or less what Carolyn Kennedy said. It was funny when she called me at my office, where I office in Des Moines, and she said, Michael, this is Carolyn Kennedy, and I thought I would check with you and ask your permission to award to you the Profiles in Courage Award. And okay, who's joking here? I just thought it was so weird. She just retired as ambassador to Japan now, but I said, you're asking my permission to give me that award. And in fact, I didn't really know much about the award. At the end of the conversation, now this is called the Profiles in Courage Award, which was started after President Kennedy got assassinated, and it's to memorialize what he emphasized in his book about political actors that exhibit courage in the context of government and governing. Anyway, I talked to her for about a half hour, told her some stories that I had known her dad's brothers, both Robert and Ted Kennedy, and that came and went, and then I quickly hung up and called Justice Turnitz and said, did you just get a call from Caroline Kennedy? Yes, I did. Oh my gosh, do you think it's true? We're still suspicious that this was just a big joke. And I found out later when we were talking, I said, well, God, I talked to her for about a half hour and she just stopped. What? I talked to her for like 3 minutes. Why had to tell her some stories about her uncles, Uncle Ted and Robert, and by the time we were done, a half hour had gone by. She was very jealous of my contact with her. Now, the Profiles in Courage Award is awarded out in Boston at the Kennedy Museum. We had 100 Iowans fly out to Boston for the award. One little notable thing was my college roommate from California, law school roommate from California, flew out to be at the award, and all my friends were just wanting to meet him real quick because he'd been an extra in a lot of Mad Men episodes, which is shot out in California, and you can see him in a few where usually it's in a cocktail bar where he sits in the background having a drink or eating a meal, but at least he had fun being an extra. He was a retired lawyer by then. We knew our decision that we made in Barton would be unpopular with many people. We even knew that in the back of our minds that it could jeopardize our careers. We could lose our jobs because of the decision. But we took an oath of office that we promised to uphold the Iowa Constitution without fear, favor, or hope of reward. And that is what we did. The 7 of us on our court had decided early on, as a group, we talked about this, on other kind of cases, how we would conduct ourselves with intellectual integrity and how we would decide cases fairly and impartially, and that our only allegiance was to the commitment to the rule of law. Those principles made our decision in Barnum easy. As I have said it many times, that the decision itself wrote itself. That is, if you abide by what lawyers and judges use in trying to apply constitutional analysis to issues on equal protection, the case came out easy. Now that doesn't mean the decision was easy to make. That we had to write a lot of stuff to substantiate how we were ruling. Yet it was clear that we had to rule this way on equal protection. Our founding fathers created government based on the rule of law, but the rule of law cannot exist without judicial independence, and that's why I want to talk to you just briefly about judicial independence. What does that mean in this context? I'm referring to a judiciary that makes decisions independent of, free of, outside influence. Judicial independence does not give judges the freedom to rule as they wish, to rule as they want. but it gives them the freedom to rule as they must. The case reflects that decision. I gave a speech to a couple hundred LGBT activists, lawyer activists, down in Kansas City a few years ago. And I think I knocked them back a little bit when I said, none of us on the court were for you. Now later in my Profiles in Courage speech, I do acknowledge that I'm glad we ruled the way we did. It turned out right. But we were not for you. We were for the rule of law. We were for our Constitution. Because I think they expected me to say, I'm on your side, I'm going to fight for you. Judicial independence is certainly tested when a judge knows his or her decision is contrary to popular opinion and perhaps will lead to the voters holding the judge accountable in the next election for ignoring the voters' views. Nevertheless, judges cannot base their decisions on public opinion or polls, on the wishes of the past or potential campaign contributors, or on judges' personal beliefs, because when judges do that, they cease to be a government based on law. But the preservation of our system of fair and impartial justice is not solely the responsibility of the judges. It's the responsibility of all of you in this room. These are forces in this country, there are forces in this country that seek to politicize the judiciary. So judges will be selected not on the basis of their neutrality or good character, but on the basis of their commitment to a particular ideology, to a certain view on specific issues. You see that played out on bigly when we appoint people to the U.S. Supreme Court. This whole staging of what are their beliefs and in conformance with a political party are played out, even though they try to do the dance of neutrality as they get confirmed in the Senate. We must individually, all of us here, collectively resist those efforts, whether they take the form of corporate campaign contributions or threats by groups with political or social agendas. Citizens must demand that judges be chosen and retained for the professional competency, for their ability to be fair and impartial, and for their commitment to look at the facts and issues of each case, and only then make up their mind on the outcome. An even more disturbing trend right now is the demonizing of judges and increasingly intimidation of the judiciary, both of which we experienced here in Iowa. Public officials and other leaders resort to name calling and denigration rather than engaging in civil discussion of the issues or constructive solutions. Calling the judges activists or elitists has nothing substantive to the public debate, but the important concerns of our time, I think, that the kind of labels that they put on us really help drive this vote, the votes that come up in retention elections. Now, frankly, I like to be called a black robe master, which was one of the labels placed on us during the election. You can call me that if you want, Master Streit, that'd be perfectly fine. But this is a type of bullying behavior. It weakens the ability of the courts to uphold the rule of law, to protect social, political, economic, and civil rights of the citizens. Not just those of the most vociferous, the most popular, the most organized, and the most powerful. At the end of the day, the debate about controversial decisions by judges who make them boils down to a simple question. What kind of court system do you Americans want? A court system that issues ruling based upon public opinion polls, campaign contributions, and political intimidation, or a court system that issues impartial rulings based upon the rule of law? We did not know how effective the small-mind troglodytes would be able to capture the language and feeling of frustration of some voters over the role of government and the cry for freedom. I wrote that line many years ago before the last presidential election. On the Supreme Court of the decision up in Ames that said the city council there banned more than 3 unrelated adults from living in a single-family dwelling zoned area. They're trying to stop animal houses from being developed in residential areas. I think that's a stupid law in the context of Ames or Iowa City both, that you're going to stop this and then make it illegal to rent to more than 3 unrelated adults, even if 4 of them are all Catholic nuns or something like that. But I think it's just you're trying to stop a lot of economic pressure to rent out to people. But that's what they, and I just thought it was a stupid law. But was it constitutional or not? We interpreted that it was a constitutional prohibition and could be enforced by the city. I cite that as an example of I don't agree with that law, but it wasn't a violation of our Constitution. So, but to get to your second part of your question, that's why I'm talking to bright people like this, that as they go through life, they should speak up, speak against power, speak against people that bring these political forces. The money is just more and more there. In our election, they say over $1 million was spent in Little Iowa campaigning against the judges. Well, in reality, it was over $3 million because of about $2 million of dark money. The head of the campaign against us, he put one claim in for $56 for mileage and nothing else, which tells us that was all dark money that went to pay him. He had an executive director that drew about $80,000 out of the campaign. He had 6 full-time employees besides the officers in that group. All that money got paid for by mostly dark money rather than acknowledged money. They acknowledged about $1.5 million. So what can we do without getting into campaigns? The judges themselves speak. The 3 of us spoke to every Rotary, every Kiwanis club, every group that had any inkling to invite us to speak. That's wholly ineffective as a campaign tool against a $1 million commercial. You guys might be a little young to remember this, but the commercial against us had our heads rotating on like a lazy Susan, and which is a commercial I do play from time to time when I make speeches, because everybody thinks it's comical. But that is money that we cannot always counter by just speeches to Rotary, and I mentioned Rotary quite a few times here today. But what we need to do is to have our bar association, the lawyers, we need our politicians, fellow politicians saying, no, that's not right, let's not attack our courts. President Trump got some of that type of reaction when he made statements about a federal judge and his national heritage. And that's what we need, is always a dialogue to push back against what they're trying to do, and that's to manipulate the judicial decisions being made. So I think it's more of a community effort. The parties have to stop getting involved in trying to manipulate judge decisions. For instance, probably uncalled for President Obama to actually criticize one of the decisions to the justices sitting right there during the State of the Union. So anyway, what we can do is just to ask everybody to be good citizens. Other questions? I've already stamped out all the questions. Anyway, thank you very much for having me here. Good luck on everything.